The sun hung low over the sleepy little town of Maple Ridge, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The roads were empty except for the rumble of engines breaking the silence. A convoy of motorcycles, black and chrome, thundered down the asphalt, their riders clad in worn leather jackets marked with the emblem of the Iron Brotherhood. They weren't just any group of bikers. The Brotherhood had a reputation. Some feared them, others respected them. They weren't outlaws, but they lived by their own code: stand up for those who can't stand for themselves. At the front of the pack rode Jack Bear Dalton, a man whose presence alone could quiet a crowd. With his thick beard, broad shoulders, and a scar running across his cheek, he looked like someone you wouldn't dare mess with. But beneath that rugged exterior was a man who'd known pain, loss, and redemption, and that's why he'd built this brotherhood. That afternoon, they stopped at Maggie's Diner, a small roadside cafe just outside of town. It was their usual rest stop, where the smell of coffee and pie always greeted them like an old friend. Jack parked his Harley, dismounted, and nodded to the others. 15-minute break, boys. Then we roll out. Inside the diner, laughter echoed. The bikers talked about road trips, engines, and their next charity ride for local kids. Despite their rough looks, they had soft hearts for good causes. Jack sat near the window, sipping his black coffee, when something caught his eye. A flash of movement outside, small and frantic. Before he could react, the door burst open. A little girl, barefoot and covered in dust, stumbled inside. Her face was streaked with tears, her small chest heaving with every breath. Every head in the diner turned toward her. "Please," she cried, voice shaking. "Someone help my mama!" The entire room froze. Jack's mug hit the table with a loud clank. He stood up slowly, his eyes softening as he crouched down to her level. "Hey, sweetheart," he said in a deep but gentle tone. "What's your name?" "Lily," she sniffed. "They're beating my mama. Please." "They're hurting her bad." The diner fell silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Jack looked up at his brothers, and without saying a word, they all understood. He grabbed his helmet and turned to the girl. "Show us where, Lily." The bikers moved fast. Engines roared back to life, tires screeching against the pavement as they followed the little girl's directions down a narrow dirt road that led into the woods. Jack rode beside her, his heart pounding. After a few minutes, they reached an old, rusted trailer sitting crookedly behind the trees. The yard was littered with beer cans and broken bottles. From inside came the unmistakable sound of shouting, and then a thud. Lily gasped. "That's him." "Please hurry!" Jack jumped off his bike and motioned for the others to spread out. He approached the trailer door, fists clenched. He could hear the man's voice, slurred, angry, violent. "Get up, you useless woman." Another sound followed, something breaking, then a cry of pain. That was it. Jack kicked the door open so hard it nearly flew off its hinges. The smell of alcohol and cigarette smoke hit him instantly. Inside, a woman, Lily's mother, was on the floor, her face bruised, tears streaming down her cheeks. Towering over her was a man with a beer bottle in hand, rage in his eyes. The man spun around, startled. "Who the hell are you?" he barked. Jack stepped inside, eyes dark with fury. "The guys who are gonna make you stop." The man laughed, a cruel, hollow laugh. "You think you can come into my house and tell me what to do?" Before he could raise the bottle again, two bikers, Tank and Diesel, grabbed his arms. The bottle shattered against the floor. He struggled, but he was no match for them. Tank twisted his arm behind his back until he yelped. Jack knelt down beside the woman. "Ma'am, you okay?" She tried to speak, her lips trembling. He was drinking again. "I tried to leave, but he..." Jack shook his head gently. "You don't have to explain. You're safe now." Lily ran to her mother and threw her arms around her. "Mama!" The woman hugged her tightly, sobbing into her daughter's hair. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Jack stood up and turned toward the man, who was still struggling in the biker's grip. "You lay a hand on her again," Jack said, voice low and steady, "and I swear you'll regret it." The man spat on the ground. "You don't scare me." Jack's expression didn't change. "I don't have to. The cops will handle the rest." One of the bikers, Razor, already had his phone out, calling the local sheriff, an old friend who knew the Brotherhood well.
Within minutes, sirens echoed through the trees. The man cursed and tried to break free, but Tank tightened his grip.
"You might want to calm down," Tank said with a smirk. "You're making this worse for yourself." When the police arrived, the bikers handed him over without another word. As the officers cuffed him and led him away, he shouted over his shoulder, "You'll pay for this!" Jack ignored him. He was kneeling again beside Lily and her mother. "You've got somewhere to stay?" he asked softly. The woman shook her head. "No, he wouldn't let me work. I have nowhere to go." Jack looked at one of his men, Hawk, who nodded immediately. "There's a women's shelter in town. My wife volunteers there. We'll take them." Lily clung to Jack's leather vest. "Thank you, mister," she whispered. He smiled and handed her his bandana. "Keep that, little one. It means you've got brothers now. Nobody's gonna hurt you again." The bikers helped them gather a few belongings, a small suitcase, a torn teddy bear, a family photo, and loaded them into one of the trucks that followed the group. As the police car disappeared down the road, Jack stood watching, hands on his hips, the wind rustling through the trees. He'd seen a lot of darkness in his life, but this hit different, maybe because it reminded him of his own past, the night he watched his father raise a hand to his mother, the night he swore he'd never stand by while someone else suffered. As they escorted the woman and her daughter back to town, Jack made himself a silent promise. This wasn't over. He wasn't just going to save them, he was going to make sure they had a life worth living. And little did he know, that promise would change all their lives forever. A week had passed since that chaotic night in the woods, the night when the roar of motorcycles became the sound of rescue. The small town of Maple Ridge still whispered about it. People had always judged the Iron Brotherhood by their looks, leather jackets, beards, tattoos. But now, whispers of respect began to replace fear. For Sarah, the woman they saved, and her daughter Lily, the week felt like a blur. They were now staying in a local women's shelter, thanks to the help of Jack Bear Dalton and his crew. The room was small, 2 beds, 1 window, and a fading curtain. But for the first time in years, they could sleep without fear. Still, safety didn't erase the scars. Sarah would wake up at night, clutching her chest, hearing echoes of her ex-husband's anger. Lily would crawl into her bed, crying silently. Each time, Sarah would whisper, "It's over now, baby. The bikers won't let him hurt us anymore." And she was right. One morning, as Sarah was folding clothes donated by the shelter, she heard the familiar sound of engines outside. The noise that once would have terrified her now brought comfort. She rushed to the window, and there they were, the Iron Brotherhood, pulling up in a perfect line like soldiers on steel horses. Lily screamed with joy. "Mama, it's them!" She ran out barefoot before Sarah could even stop her. Jack got off his bike and laughed as Lily ran straight into his arms. "Well, look who it is, our little angel," he said, lifting her up. "You been taking care of your mom?" Lily nodded proudly. "She's smiling again." Jack grinned, but when his eyes met Sarah's, he saw the exhaustion behind her smile. He knew that kind of tired. It wasn't physical. It was the kind that came from years of being hurt and scared. "We came to check in," Jack said, taking off his sunglasses. "Got something for you two." Sarah looked confused. "Jack, you've already done so much." "You don't owe us anything." Jack shook his head. "We don't walk away from family." He turned to one of his men, Tank, who opened a duffel bag and pulled out several boxes. Clothes, groceries, a few toys, even a brand new pink backpack for Lily, another biker, Razor, brought over a folded-up bicycle with a pink bow on the handlebar. Lily gasped so loudly it made everyone laugh. "For me?" she asked, eyes wide. Jack winked. "Well, who else rides like lightning?" Lily hugged the bike, speechless. Sarah's eyes welled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Jack reached into his jacket and pulled out a small brown envelope. He handed it to her. "This'll do more than thanks." Sarah opened it. Inside was a set of keys and a small stack of papers. Her hands shook as she read them. "Jack, this is—" "An apartment lease?" Jack nodded. "1 year? Paid in full. It's nothing fancy, but it's safe, clean, and yours." Sarah covered her mouth in disbelief. "Jack, I can't. This is too much." "I can't take this from you." Jack's voice softened. "You already did the day Lily ran to us for help. You're not alone anymore. You've got us now." Sarah couldn't hold back her tears any longer. She hugged him tightly, whispering through sobs, "Thank you. Thank you for giving us a new start." Jack patted her back gently. "You don't owe me a thing. Just promise me one thing. Never look back." The following day, the bikers helped move Sarah and Lily into their new apartment on the quieter side of town. The building wasn't new, but it was freshly painted, with flowers blooming outside and sunlight spilling through the windows. The Brotherhood worked like a moving crew. Tank carried the furniture as if it weighed nothing, Razor assembled a kitchen table, and Hawk installed locks on every door and window, just in case. Jack watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a proud smile on his face. "Not bad for a bunch of bikers, huh?" Lily giggled as she rode her new bike in circles on the pavement outside. Sarah watched from the porch, her eyes full of warmth. For the first time in years, her laughter sounded real. Inside, Jack hung a framed sign above the kitchen door. It read, "Home isn't where you live, it's where you're safe." When Sarah saw it, she couldn't stop crying. "You guys even thought of decorations?" she asked with a watery laugh. Jack shrugged. "My sister made it. Said you'd need a reminder." Before they left, Jack knelt beside Lily. "You know, kiddo, you've got the bravest heart I've ever seen. You saved your mama that night. Don't ever forget that." Lily smiled shyly and handed him a crayon drawing she'd made. It showed motorcycles, her and her mom in the middle, surrounded by smiling bikers. At the top, in shaky handwriting, she'd written, "My guardian angels." Jack's throat tightened. He folded the drawing carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "I'll keep this forever, sweetheart." Months rolled by. Sarah got a job at a local diner, while Lily started school. Life slowly began to bloom again. The bikers still visited every weekend, sometimes to fix the plumbing, sometimes just to bring dinner. The neighbors started to notice too. They no longer saw the Brotherhood as outlaws, but as protectors. One chilly evening, Jack came by the apartment and found Sarah reading a bedtime story to Lily. He stood quietly by the door, smiling. When Sarah looked up, she waved him in. "Didn't mean to interrupt," he said softly. "You're never an interruption," she replied. "She's just about to fall asleep." Lily yawned, clutching her teddy bear. "Night, Jack," she murmured sleepily. Jack brushed her hair gently. "Sleep tight, little warrior." When she was asleep, Sarah looked at him with gratitude. "You know, I used to think the world was full of cruel people," she said. "But then you showed up." Jack chuckled quietly. "Nah, the world's just full of people who forgot how to care. We're just trying to remind them." Sarah smiled. "You did more than remind me. You gave us back our lives." Jack nodded slowly. "That's all the thanks we ever need." As he turned to leave, Sarah stopped him. "Jack, yeah?" She hesitated, then said softly, "You saved us, but you also healed us. I'll never forget that." Jack gave a small smile. "That's what brothers are for." The Iron Brotherhood continued their rides through Maple Ridge, not just as bikers, but as guardians. Every time they roared past the school, Lily would run to the window and wave, her laughter echoing across the playground. And every time, Jack would raise a hand in return, a silent promise that she and her mother would always be protected, because some heroes don't wear uniforms. They don't fly or carry badges. They just ride, carrying their code of honor, their scars, and their heart on the open road. And on that road, the sound of their engines wasn't noise anymore. It was hope.